4 men in tuxedos. One target. And the only person standing between her and a bullet was a security guard who wasn't supposed to be a hero. Ethan Cross had spent 12 years learning how to read a room, first in the Marines, then in every quiet, underpaid shift since. He wasn't supposed to notice anything tonight except drunk guests and empty champagne flutes. But he noticed. And the moment he moved, everything changed. If you've made it this far, hit that like button, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The chandelier above the Harrington Grand Ballroom was the kind of thing that made people stop talking mid-sentence. It hung from the vaulted ceiling like a frozen explosion. 3,000 hand-cut crystals arranged in concentric rings, each one catching the light from a different angle, scattering gold and white across the faces of 400 guests who had each paid $25,000 for the privilege of standing beneath it. The room smelled like money, old money, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. The women wore gowns that cost more than most people's cars. The men shook hands the way people do when shaking hands is a transaction. Ethan Cross stood near the east entrance with his back against the wall and his hands clasped in front of him and thought about the transmission on his truck. It had been making a noise for 3 weeks, a low, wet grinding sound when he shifted between second and third gear. He'd been putting it off because putting it off was cheaper than fixing it, and cheaper was the only currency he had any real access to right now. He'd done the math that morning while Maya was eating cereal at the kitchen table. $240 in the checking account, rent due in 11 days, and a charity gala security shift paying him $320 for the night. The math worked. Barely. The way math in his life always worked. Barely. He adjusted the earpiece in his left ear and did another slow scan of the room. The gala was a fundraiser for something called the Meridian Education Initiative, which as far as Ethan could tell was a collection of wealthy people congratulating each other for caring about children they would never meet. There were speeches scheduled, a live auction, a string quartet in the corner that had been playing the same 3 pieces on rotation for the past hour. The food was arranged in architectural formations on long tables near the back, tiny things on tiny plates, the kind of food that made you hungry by the time you were done eating it. Ethan had been working security for Garrison Event Services for 14 months. Before that, 2 years doing warehouse logistics. Before that, a stretch of bad decisions following an honorable discharge that he didn't particularly enjoy thinking about. He wasn't proud of the gap. He wasn't ashamed of it either. He'd gotten through it, and getting through things was something he was genuinely good at. The earpiece crackled. "Cross, you got eyes on the East Corridor?" "Clear," he said. "Keep it that way. The keynote speaker's in 20. "Copy." He watched a city councilman laugh too loudly at something a woman in a red dress had said. He watched a waiter nearly drop a tray of glasses and recover without spilling a drop. He watched the entrance, the exits, the faces, the hands. It was automatic by now. The scanning, the cataloging. The Marines had built it into him, and 12 years of civilian life hadn't managed to knock it out. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. "You said you'd be home by midnight. It's already 9. "Maya." He typed back quickly, one thumb. "Still working. I'll be home by 12, I promise. Don't stay up." 3 dots appeared, then, "I'm 16, not 6. Also the router's doing the thing again. Unplug it, count to 30, plug it back in." That's what I did. Now it's just blinking orange at me. Orange means it's thinking. Routers don't think. This one does. Philosophical crisis. Give it time. A pause. Then, "You're weird." Then, "Be safe." He put the phone away. Maya had been doing that lately, saying "be safe" at the end of messages, in a way that was casual, but wasn't entirely casual. She was 16, and she'd had 12 years of being the kid whose dad came home from places that were on the news. She'd developed a reflex. He didn't know whether to be proud of her for it or worried about what it said about the kind of childhood he'd accidentally given her. Both, probably. He looked up and did another sweep of the room. That was when he saw the first one. The man was standing near the bar on the west side of the ballroom, holding a glass of something amber-colored and not drinking it. That by itself meant nothing. Plenty of people held drinks at events like this without actually wanting them, using the glass as a social prop, something to do with their hands. But this man wasn't working the room. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was watching the space near the main stage with the particular quality of attention that Ethan recognized because he'd been trained to have it. Focused, patient, deliberate. The man was maybe 6 feet, built. His tuxedo fit well, but it fit the way a rental fits when you've got a body that doesn't match standard measurements. Slightly off across the shoulders, the sleeves a half-inch too short. Dark hair, clean-shaved, somewhere between 35 and 45. He wasn't a guest. He was wearing a guest's clothes. Ethan kept his gaze moving, didn't stop on the man. He scanned left, found the second one faster than he expected. Near the string quartet, standing at the edge of a cluster of guests, close enough to seem like he belonged to the group, far enough to move freely. Similar build to the first. Similar quality of stillness. He was holding a champagne flute by the stem and his eyes were tracking something that Ethan couldn't see yet from his angle. 2. Both armed, almost certainly. The stillness was the tell. The way they held their weight slightly forward, balanced, ready. Ethan had stood like that. He'd been trained to stand like that. You only stood like that when you expected to need to move fast. He didn't reach for his radio yet. He needed the full picture. He pushed off the wall and moved along the east side of the room, angling toward the main stage, making it look like a routine patrol. He nodded at a woman in a silver gown who made brief eye contact with him. He sidestepped a waiter. He kept his peripheral vision wide. Third man. Near the rear emergency exit, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. Same posture, same stillness. He had a small silver pin on his lapel. Ethan caught it when the chandelier light hit it at the right angle. Not a charity gala pin. Something else. Too small to read from here. He pulled out his phone as if checking a message and turned slightly, scanning the room from the new angle. Fourth man. He almost missed this one because the fourth man was the most convincing. He was actually talking to someone, laughing at something, playing the role of guest better than the others. But his laugh was 2 beats too short, and his eyes didn't move the way a person's eyes move when they're genuinely enjoying a conversation. They kept cutting left, toward the stage, toward the woman standing at the base of the steps talking to the event coordinator. Ariana Vale. Ethan knew who she was the way most people who followed tech news knew who she was, vaguely, impressively. Vale Technologies. Cybersecurity. She'd built the company from a single product out of a shared office space when she was 23, and it was now worth somewhere in the $8 billion range, which was the kind of number that stopped feeling real when you thought about it too hard. She was 30. She was the keynote speaker tonight. She was wearing a deep blue dress and standing with the easy confidence of someone who was used to being the most capable person in any room she entered. She had no idea. The 4 men were positioned in a rough perimeter around the stage approach. 2 on the outside, 2 closer in, the whole formation designed to converge from multiple angles. It wasn't random, it was planned. Someone had done reconnaissance, knew the layout, knew the schedule. Ethan thought, this is an assassination. He thought it calmly, the way you think things when you've been trained to process bad information without letting it short-circuit your body. His heart rate went up. Everything else stayed level. He pressed his earpiece. Garrison, this is Cross at the east entrance. I need immediate backup at the main stage. We have a situation. Say again, Cross. What kind of situation? 4 individuals. Potential threat to keynote speaker. I'm moving now. Get security to the stage exits. Cross, I need you to confirm before we... He took the earpiece out and put it in his jacket pocket. There was no time to confirm anything. The event coordinator was moving away from Ariana, which meant Ariana was about to be alone near the base of the steps, and the 2 inside men had already started shifting their positions. Ethan had maybe 45 seconds before the window opened. He moved across the room with his head down and his hands loose and his body relaxed, the way his sergeant had taught him to move when you didn't want people to know you were coming. The room was dense with guests, and the string quartet had transitioned to something louder, a Vivaldi piece, all motion and urgency, which was either ironic or useful. Ethan wasn't sure which. He reached Ariana Vale just as the first man broke from his position at the bar. Ms. Vale, Ethan said, stepping in close and turning so his body was between her and the approaching threat. I need you to come with me right now. She looked at him the way powerful women at expensive galas look at security guards who suddenly appear in their personal space, measuring, skeptical, not immediately impressed. "Excuse me?" "Security concern. We need to move." He kept his voice low and steady. "Please." "I have a keynote in... I know. I need 30 seconds of your time right now, or this night ends very differently than you planned." Something in his tone, the flatness of it, the complete absence of performance, made her stop. She looked at his face. She was smart enough to read it. "Okay," she said. He moved her left, toward the alcove near the stage entrance, which put a pillar between them and the man from the bar who had now cleared the crowd and was moving fast. Ethan caught the movement in his peripheral vision, the shift in the man's body. The moment the performance of guests dropped, and the professional underneath it emerged. The man adjusted course toward them. Ethan stepped out of the alcove to meet him. What happened next was not the kind of thing that looked graceful. Movies made fights look like choreography. This was not that. The man was fast and trained, and he came in without hesitation, one hand reaching for something inside his jacket. Ethan closed the distance before the hand got there. Inside the reach, controlling the arm at the wrist, using the man's own forward momentum to redirect him into the pillar. The impact was loud enough to be heard over the string quartet. The man went down. The weapon, a compact pistol with a suppressor attached, hit the marble floor and skidded under a table. The ballroom registered the sound as one of those undefined social disruptions. A crash, maybe something fell, heads turned but hadn't yet resolved the situation into something real. Ethan had maybe 15 seconds before the panic set in. He turned back to the alcove. "Stay against the wall and don't move." Ariana was watching him with an expression he couldn't fully read. "There are more of them," she said. Not a question. "3 more. Stay here." He moved back into the open room just as the second man from near the quartet broke toward the stage. Ethan was already moving on an intercept line, cutting the angle, using the crowd as cover in a way the other man hadn't anticipated. He came in from the right, caught the man mid-stride, and the two of them went into a catering table in a collision that sent champagne flutes cascading off the edge in a bright, shattering avalanche. That was the moment the room understood that something was wrong. The sound of breaking glass at that volume, and the sight of 2 men struggling in the formal space of a charity gala crossed whatever threshold the guests needed. The screaming started, the movement, the chaotic flow of 400 people trying to locate exits while simultaneously trying to understand what they were running from. The string quartet stopped mid-phrase. The second man was good, better than the first. He got a hand free and landed something hard across Ethan's left cheekbone that made the room tilt sideways for a half-second. Ethan took it and kept moving, got his arm around the man's neck from behind, applied pressure, held it. 8 seconds. The man's body went slack. Ethan was breathing hard now. The adrenaline was doing what adrenaline does, sharpening and blurring at the same time. The third man, the one from the rear exit, had changed his objective. Instead of moving toward the stage, he was moving toward Ariana's position in the alcove. He'd spotted her while Ethan was occupied with the second man. Ethan shouted, just a single sharp sound, no words. And it pulled the man's attention for the fraction of a second he needed to cross the distance. He hit him at a run, shoulder into midsection, and they went down together between 2 rows of abandoned chairs. The man was heavier than Ethan expected and got on top for a moment, hands going for Ethan's throat. Ethan got his knee up, created space, then used the chair to his right as leverage to reverse the position. His knuckles split on the man's jaw. He felt it. He didn't stop. The fourth man had gotten through. Ethan saw him the moment he finished with the third. The man was in the alcove. He'd reached Ariana, had her arm, was pulling her toward the rear exit with a pistol pressed low against her side. Ethan stood up. The room around him was largely emptied now, guests streaming out through every available door, the staff pressed against walls or ducked behind tables. The chandelier still blazed above all of it, indifferent and enormous, throwing gold light across the overturned chairs and the scattered glassware, and the $400 place settings sliding off tilted tables. The man with Ariana stopped when he saw Ethan standing there. "Walk away," the man said. His voice was controlled, professional. He had the gun pressed to Ariana's ribs, and his grip on her arm was tight enough that she was holding herself very still. "This is not your problem." Ethan looked at Ariana. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set and her eyes were completely clear. Scared, but functional. He'd seen that look before, and people who decided to be brave because the alternative was worse. "You okay?" he asked her. She looked at him like the question was slightly beside the point given the gun situation. "More or less." "Good." He looked back at the man. "You've got one partner conscious and two who aren't. The building is surrounded by police right now. I can hear the sirens. You can hear them too. Whatever this was supposed to be, it's done. Move aside or she gets hurt. If she gets hurt, you lose your only exit. The police want witnesses, not a hostage situation. Let her go and you might get out of the building." He had no idea if that was true. He was making it up as he went. The man's eyes moved to the entrance doors, listening to the approaching sirens. His grip on Ariana's arm shifted slightly. Not relaxing, but recalculating. Ethan moved, not toward the man. He angled right, changing the man's sightline, pulling his attention just enough. It was a half-second of divided focus, and half a second was everything he needed. He crossed the distance in 3 strides. His left hand went to the gun, redirecting it away from Ariana's body before the man could correct his aim. The weapon discharged. The suppressed crack of it was still loud enough in the empty ballroom that Ariana flinched. But the shot went wide, punching a hole in the plaster above the stage entrance. Ethan had the man's wrist locked, turned, and applied the kind of pressure that ended arguments. The gun hit the floor. Ethan put the man down next to it. He stood there for a moment, breathing. The sirens were very close now. Red and blue light strobed through the tall windows along the south wall, painting everything in brief, alternating colors. Ariana Vale walked out of the alcove and stood next to him, and looked at the man on the floor and the 2 unconscious men near the stage and the scattered debris of what had been a very expensive charity event. Then she looked at Ethan, at the split knuckle on his right hand, the beginning of a bruise rising along his left cheekbone, the loosened bow tie, the jacket that had taken the kind of damage that rental deposits were not going to cover. "You're bleeding," she said. "A little," he said. "Are you one of the event security staff?" "Yes." "How much are they paying you tonight?" $320. She was quiet for a moment. Outside, car doors were slamming and boots were moving across the entrance steps. "That seems insufficient," she said. "It usually is." The doors came open and the police came in, and the night dissolved into the organized chaos of statements and more statements, the flash of badge numbers and the yellow tape going up around things that needed to be preserved, and the gradual, careful process of understanding what had happened in the Harrington Grand Ballroom and why. Ethan gave his statement twice, once to a patrol officer and once to a detective named Sharp, who had the particular energy of someone who'd been woken up and wasn't angry about it yet, but was getting there. He answered the questions he could answer and said, "I don't know," to the ones he couldn't, and kept his account precise, the way he'd been taught to document things, what he saw, what he did, what the result was. He did not mention that his knuckles hurt worse than he was letting on, or that his left ear was ringing from the suppressed gunshot, or that he was going to be extremely stiff tomorrow morning. At one point, across the ballroom, he saw Ariana Vale being interviewed by 2 plainclothes detectives. She was composed, answering questions methodically, the same flatness in her voice he'd noticed when she'd said more or less, like a person who had decided that falling apart was a thing she'd schedule for later. One of the detectives showed her something on a phone or a photograph, and something shifted in her expression. Not fear exactly. Something cooler and more complicated than fear. Recognition, Ethan thought. She knew something about what that was. He filed it away. He got his phone out at 11:47 and texted Maya, "Leaving soon, you up?" She responded in 30 seconds, which meant she'd been up, saw something on the news about a thing at the Harrington. "Was that where you were?" He stared at that for a second. "Yeah, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." "Go to sleep, Dad." "I'm fine, Maya, I promise. Home in an hour." The news said someone stopped an attack. They're calling him a security guard. He didn't respond to that one. He was almost at the exit when Ariana Vale appeared beside him. She'd collected a small clutch purse from somewhere, and her hair had come partially loose from whatever arrangement it had been in at the beginning of the evening. Two of her security detail, her actual security detail, the kind that came with a net worth in the billions, were behind her at a respectful distance. "Mr. Cross," she said. He stopped. "Ms. Vale, I wanted to say thank you, in person, before you disappeared into the night." "You're welcome." She studied him for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When you made the decision to intervene, when you saw those men and understood what was happening, was there a moment of hesitation? I'm curious what the calculation looked like." It was a strange question. He thought about it honestly instead of giving her the easy answer. "No hesitation," he said. "But it wasn't a calculation either. It was just, they were there, you were there, and I was the only one who'd noticed. So, she said. So. She was quiet for a moment, looking at him with the same focused quality she'd had when they were standing in the alcove, and she'd looked at his face and decided to trust him. "I know who these men work for," she said. Her voice was very quiet now, just for him. "And if I'm right, this isn't over. This was the first move." She paused. "I want to talk to you tomorrow, properly. Will you hear me out?" He thought about the transmission, the 11 days until rent, the $320 that wasn't in his account yet. He thought about Maya texting him from the couch, where she'd been watching the news, pretending she hadn't been worried. He thought about the look in Ariana Vale's eyes when the detective had shown her whatever he'd shown her. The recognition. "Yeah," he said. "I'll hear you out." He drove home through quiet streets, the city half asleep around him. The truck made the grinding noise between second and third, and he shifted around it the way he'd learned to do, keeping it smooth, compensating. Maya was on the couch when he came in, laptop open, the local news still streaming. She looked up at him with the specific expression she had when she was trying to assess whether he was actually okay or just claiming to be. Sharp eyes moving over the bruise on his cheek and the wrapped knuckles and the ruined jacket. "You said you were fine," she said. "I am fine." "You look like you lost an argument with a pillar." "I mostly won that argument." He sat down next to her, and the couch cushion exhaled sadly under the combined weight. "How much did they have on the news?" "Not much. They said a security officer intervened and stopped an attack on Ariana Vale. They didn't have your name." She looked at him. "But I knew." Educated guess. "You were the only security person working that event who was also a Marine, so yeah, educated guess." She pulled her knees up. "Was it bad?" "It was manageable." "Was anyone hurt?" "No one permanent." She was quiet for a moment, then, "You talked to her, to Ariana Vale." "Briefly." "And?" He looked at his daughter. She was 16 and her mind worked like a machine that had no off switch, always running, always connecting things, always 3 steps ahead of wherever the conversation was supposed to be. She'd gotten that from her mother's side, he was fairly sure. He'd always been more of a step 1, step 2 kind of thinker. Maya thought in spirals. "She wants to meet tomorrow," he said. "She thinks she knows who's behind it, thinks it's not over." Maya absorbed this. "And you said yes." "I said I'd hear her out." "That's a yes." She turned back to the laptop and pulled up something. It took her about 8 seconds. She turned the screen toward him. Ariana Vale, founder and CEO of Vale Technologies. Net worth estimated at $8.2 billion. Company specializes in enterprise cybersecurity infrastructure. In 2019, Vale provided key data to federal investigators that led to the conviction of Marcus Holt, former CFO of Renshaw Capital, on charges of securities fraud and wire fraud. Holt was sentenced to 14 years, conviction overturned on appeal in 2022. Current whereabouts, unknown. Ethan read it twice. "I found that in 4 minutes, Maya said. She's been targeted because of what she did to Holt, or because of what her company has that someone wants. Maybe both." She looked at him steadily. "This is bigger than a security shift, Dad." He looked at the name on the screen. Marcus Holt. He let the information settle. Yeah, he said. I think you're right. Maya closed the laptop. So what do we do? You go to school, I go to the meeting. That's not what I meant, and you know it. He knew. He looked at her for a long moment. The set of her jaw, the directness of her eyes, the particular quality of stubbornness that he recognized because he saw it in the mirror every morning. Let's see what she has to say, he said finally. Then we figure out what comes next. Maya nodded. She stood up, stretched, padded toward the hallway, and then stopped. Dad. Yeah. You did the right thing tonight. She said it matter-of-factly, the way she said most things. Just so you know. He stayed on the couch after she went to bed and looked at the ceiling and listened to the street outside. The distant sound of a car passing, the settling of the building, the ordinary quiet of an ordinary neighborhood that had no idea that tonight anything had changed. He looked at his hand. The knuckles had stopped bleeding. They'd be stiff in the morning. He thought about 4 men in tuxedos who hadn't been guests. About a woman who'd known in an instant, looking at his face, that she could trust him. About a name on a screen to Marcus Holt, and the particular kind of danger that comes from a man who's already lost everything and decided someone else should pay for it. He thought, walking away was always the easier choice. He thought, I've never been good at easier. The truck would need the transmission fixed eventually. The math would have to find a way to work. It always did. He'd learned that much. He got up, turned off the living room light, and went to bed. The night was quiet. It wouldn't be quiet for long. The Vail Technologies building sat 43 floors above the financial district and looked, from the street, like someone had designed it to make other buildings feel inadequate. All glass and clean angles. The kind of architecture that said we are serious about the future without actually having to say anything. Ethan had driven past it a dozen times in his life and never thought about it. He thought about it now, standing in the lobby at 9:14 in the morning in the best jacket he owned, which was not the one from last night, watching a woman at the reception desk confirm his name against a list with the polished efficiency of someone who did this for very important people all day and had decided he was probably important enough. The bruise on his cheekbone had gone purple overnight. He'd looked at it in the bathroom mirror that morning while Maya ate toast at the kitchen table and told him it gave him character. He'd told her character was overrated. She'd said everything he said about things he was bad at was that. The elevator opened on the 38th floor, and a woman named Claire, who introduced herself as Ariana's executive assistant, walked him through a hallway that was all light and quiet, and the particular silence of serious work being done behind closed doors. She stopped at a corner office and knocked twice. "Come in," Ariana said. She was at the window when he walked in, coffee cup in hand, looking out at the city with the same focused expression he'd seen last night in the alcove, like she was reading something in it. She'd traded the evening gown for dark slacks and a gray blouse, and she looked, Ethan thought, more like herself this way. Less like a keynote speaker. More like someone who actually ran things. "Mr. Cross," she said, turning. "Thank you for coming. Sit down." He sat. The office was large but not theatrical. A working space, stacked files, a whiteboard covered in diagrams and notation along one wall, 2 monitors angled on the desk. She sat across from him and set down her coffee and looked at him with the direct, assessing quality he was starting to understand was just how she engaged with things. "How's the face?" she asked. "Fine. How are your ribs?" She paused. "Bruised? Nothing broken?" A brief pause. "You knew he had the gun against my ribs." "The way you were holding yourself. You were compensating, keeping your torso from moving against it." She nodded slowly, filed that away somewhere. "I did some reading about you last night. I figured you would. Marine Corps. 2 tours. Honorable discharge. 7 years of various things after that. Currently Garrison Event Services." She said the last part without inflection, but the absence of inflection carried its own weight. "You were decorated. That was a long time ago. Valor doesn't expire. The paycheck for it does." He meant it as a deflection, but it landed more honestly than he intended. He moved past it. "You said last night that you knew who was behind it, and that it wasn't over." She stood up and went to the whiteboard. "Marcus Holt," she said, and wrote the name in the upper left corner. "Former CFO of Renshaw Capital. In 2019, Veil Technologies provided forensic data analysis to federal investigators that helped establish a pattern of fraud and insider trading. Holt was convicted, sentenced to 14 years. She drew a line from the name and wrote, 2022, appeal, conviction overturned. He walked on a procedural technicality, evidence handling issue. The underlying conduct was never legally cleared. It just became unprosecutable. I know. I looked him up last night. She turned to look at him. You did? My daughter did. She's faster at it than I am. He kept his expression level. She found the connection in 4 minutes. Something shifted in Ariana's face. Not surprise exactly, more like recalibration. How old is she? 16. Another brief recalibration. She turned back to the board. When Holt's conviction was overturned, I received security threat assessments suggesting he'd made statements about me, about this company. Nothing actionable, vague language, the kind of thing that's hard to prosecute. But the nature of it was consistent with someone building towards something. She wrote, offshore accounts, hired contractors. What I found out this morning, which the police also found out this morning, we've been in contact, is that the 4 men from last night are all former private military contractors. 2 of them have traceable histories to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. That shell company received a series of wire transfers over the past 8 months totaling approximately $2.3 million. From Holt. We can't prove that yet. The transfers are layered through 3 intermediate accounts. But the timeline, the origin geography, and the target, she stopped. The working theory is yes. Ethan looked at the board. What does he want? Just to hurt you? No. She said it with a quiet certainty. That's what I thought at first. But last night, after the police left, my security team did a full audit of our systems. Someone attempted a network intrusion at 11:47 p.m. during the chaos of the attack. She drew a circle around a section of notes. They were using the physical event as a distraction or as a fallback. The primary objective was likely digital, access to our systems. What's in your systems worth that kind of effort? She was quiet for a moment, not reluctant, more like she was deciding how much to say and in what order. Veil Technologies has spent 3 years developing a platform called Sentinel, she said. It's an AI-based infrastructure security system, not a product we've released, an internal prototype. If it works at scale, and we believe it does, it would be capable of monitoring and defending the digital infrastructure of mid-sized nations, governments, military contractors, financial systems. She paused. It would be worth significantly more than this company's current valuation. How much more? Conservative estimate, 40 to 60 billion over 10 years, possibly more depending on licensing structure. Ethan did not say anything for a moment. He sat with that number. Holt doesn't have that kind of money to develop it himself, he said. No, but he knows people who do. People who lost significantly when his conviction tanked Renshaw Capital's stock. People who've spent the last 4 years very quietly nursing a grievance. She sat back down across from him. I'm not just a target because Marcus Holt is angry at me, Mr. Cross. I'm a target because someone wants what I built, and Holt has the personal motivation and the existing criminal infrastructure to deliver it. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on knees. Why are you telling me this? You have a security team. You've been talking to the police. The police are working the 4 men from last night. They'll get somewhere with that eventually. She folded her hands on the desk. My security team is excellent at what it's designed for. Protecting a building, protecting an executive. They're not designed for what I think this situation actually is. She looked at him directly. You saw 4 men in a room full of 400 people and understood exactly what they were before any of them moved. In less than 2 minutes, you took down 3 and managed the 4th with your words before taking him physically. You did this at a civilian event, without a weapon, in a tuxedo that cost you nothing. It was a rental, he said. I know, I'm covering the damage deposit. A brief pause. I want to hire you, directly. Personal security, yes, but also eyes. Someone who can look at a room or a situation from the outside and see what people inside it stop seeing when they're too close. He didn't say yes immediately. He thought about the transmission. He thought about Maya on the couch last night watching the news, He thought about what she'd said. This is bigger than a security shift, and the particular accuracy of it. What are you paying? He said. She named a number, weekly. It was not the number of a man who worried about 11 days until rent. He kept his face neutral with some effort. I'll need flexibility. My daughter's in school. I have obligations. Understood. Non-negotiable for me, actually. I have some understanding of what it looks like to try to do multiple things at once. I'll also need full transparency. Whatever you know about Holt, about the network, about the attempted intrusion, I see all of it. I can't work from a partial picture. Agreed. She extended her hand across the desk. He shook it. Her grip was firm, and she didn't make a performance of it. There's one more thing, he said. Yes? My daughter. She found the Holt connection in 4 minutes from a news report and a public records search. She's better at information analysis than most adults I've met. If this investigation goes where I think it's going, if there's a digital component, a financial paper trail, she could be useful. Ariana looked at him with an expression that was clearly recalibrating again. You want to involve your 16-year-old daughter? She's already involved. She started last night without being asked. He met Ariana's eyes. I'd rather she be inside the tent than working from the couch. A long pause. What's her name? Maya. Ariana was quiet for a moment longer. Then, bring her by this afternoon. Let me meet her. Maya sat across from Ariana Vale in the same chair her father had occupied that morning, holding a glass of water she hadn't touched, and looked at the whiteboard with a focused attention that Ethan recognized immediately, and Ariana seemed to recognize after about 12 seconds. You already know about Holt, Ariana said. It was not a question. Public records, securities filings, and the archived court documents from the 2019 case. Maya set down the water. The appeal was granted because a junior associate at the FBI field office didn't follow proper chain of custody on a batch of hard drives, but the financial data those drives contained was corroborated independently by Vale Technologies' own analysis. The problem is Vale's analysis was treated as supporting evidence, not primary evidence. When the primary evidence got thrown out on the chain of custody issue, there was nothing solid enough left to re-prosecute without rebuilding the case from scratch. Ariana looked at her for a moment. That's correct. You pulled all of that from public records? Court records are public. Securities filings are public. You just have to know which databases to cross-reference and be willing to read several hundred pages of legal documents, which most people aren't. Are you? I read fast. Ariana looked at Ethan. Ethan looked back at her with an expression that said, "This is what I told you." Maya pulled out a printed sheet she'd brought in a folder. Spiral-bound, Ethan noticed, because Maya spiral-bound things she considered important, which was a habit he'd never quite traced to its origin. She put it on the desk. I also pulled the shell company registration. Tidefall Holdings, Cayman Islands, registered 14 months ago. The registered agent is a law firm called Brentwood and Cass. They've acted as registered agent for 11 other shell companies in the last 6 years. 4 of those companies have been cited in SEC investigations. None have been successfully prosecuted because shell company structures in the Caymans are specifically designed to make prosecution expensive and slow, Ariana finished. Right. But, Maya tapped the sheet. 2 of those 4 companies received wire transfers from the same correspondent bank in Cyprus, and that correspondent bank has one recurring client, a private equity firm called Greywall Partners that was majority funded by Renshaw Capital before its collapse. The room was quiet for a moment. Greywall Partners, Ariana said slowly. You know it? Ethan said. I know the name. She stood up and went back to the whiteboard, added it. Her handwriting was fast and slightly angular. Renshaw Capital had several subsidiary investment vehicles. Greywall was one I'd flagged in 2018 but couldn't build a complete picture on. By the time we'd developed the analysis further, the federal case had already been filed and Greywall was peripheral to the primary charges. She looked at the board. If Greywall is still operational and still connected to Holt's network, then he's not working alone and he's not working with personal money, Ethan said. He never was, Maya said. That's the part I think got missed in the original investigation. Holt was prosecuted as the architect, But the architecture was too big for one person. He was the front. There are investors behind him who lost billions when Renshaw collapsed. People with the resources to fund a sustained operation. Ariana turned from the board and looked at Maya with the same focused, recalibrating attention she'd given Ethan that morning. "I want to offer you a formal consultation arrangement," she said. "Paid. Through our security research division. We have a student research program, which makes it administratively straightforward." She paused. "With your father's agreement." Maya looked at Ethan. He gave her the small nod she was waiting for. "Okay," she said, "but I want access to Vail's internal transaction records from the 2018 to 2019 analysis. The ones that weren't submitted as primary evidence. I want to see what you had that never made it into court." Ariana almost smiled. It was a small thing, almost not there. "I'll arrange clearance." The next 5 days were not glamorous. Ethan had expected something dramatic to happen quickly. Another attack, another move from Holt's network, some escalation that would force action. What happened instead was slower and more exhausting, and in some ways more unsettling, because it looked like nothing from the outside. He came to the Vail Technologies offices every morning. He walked the building's security protocols with their head of physical security, a compact former Secret Service agent named Devlin, who had the useful quality of being completely unimpressed by credentials and completely focused on problems. They identified 4 gaps in the building's event coverage that last night's attackers could theoretically have exploited if they'd been targeting the building rather than the gala. They plugged them. They restructured the visitor access protocol for floors 36 through 42. In the evenings, Ethan drove home, ate dinner with Maya, and listened to her report on what she'd found in the Vail financial records. She had requisitioned a second monitor for her bedroom, charged to the Vail Research Program account, which still felt slightly unreal to Ethan, and had developed a system of color-coded spreadsheets that tracked money moving through the Tidewall Holdings network across 7 years of filings. "The thing about shell companies," she explained on the third evening, eating noodles with one hand and gesturing with the other toward the screen, "is that the structure itself is a signal. Most legitimate businesses don't need 3 layers of incorporation across 4 jurisdictions. The complexity is the point. It's not hiding a secret. It's making the secret expensive to find. So how do you find it? You look for where the complexity breaks down. Somewhere in the chain, someone got lazy or cheap. A recycled registered agent, a shared bank correspondent, an address that appears in 2 different company filings from 2 different years." She scrolled. "I found one? Here." Graywall Partners filed an amendment to its registration in 2021. The address they used for the registered office, a law firm in Delaware, is the same address used by a company called Northgate Asset Management, which was registered 3 months earlier. Different law firm listed as agent. Same physical address down to the suite number. Which means? Which means both companies are using the same actual physical space, probably the same people, and the different law firm names are cosmetic. She looked at him. Northgate Asset Management received a series of capital contributions in 2022 and 2023, totaling roughly $60 million. The contributing entities are listed as 3 individual investors using numbered identities, standard for some fund structures, but combined with everything else, someone is building a war chest, Ethan said. "Someone built a war chest," she corrected. "The contribution stopped 8 months ago, right around when Tidewall Holdings was registered." He sat with that. 8 months ago. The same timeline as the wire transfers to the contractors. "They've been planning this for over a year," he said. "At least." She set down the noodles. "Dad, the night intrusion attempt, the one during the gala, has Ariana's team figured out what they were after specifically?" "Sentinel files. The prototype documentation." Maya was quiet for a moment, in the specific way she was quiet when she was running calculations. If someone has $60 million and a year of planning, they're not going to stop because 4 contractors got taken down at a gala. That was a probe. Testing security response, testing how fast police showed up, testing Ariana's personal protection detail. She paused. And testing whether anyone unexpected would show up. He looked at his daughter. "Testing me," he said. "Maybe. or testing the gap in coverage. They didn't know about you specifically, but now they do. She met his eyes. Which means we're in the picture, both of us. He'd known it was coming. He'd known it when Ariana had said it isn't over in the empty ballroom. He'd known it on some level when Maya had pulled up Holt's name on the couch that first night. Knowing it didn't make it easier to hear from his daughter's mouth. "I need you to be careful," he said. "I mean it, Maya. Whatever you're doing, the research, the analysis, you do it from here, from home, from inside this building. You don't follow anything into public space. You don't reach out to any sources." "I know. I mean it. I know, Dad. I'm not reckless. You're 16 and you're good at things, and people who are good at things sometimes confuse competence for invulnerability." She gave him the look she gave him when he said things that were true, but annoying. "That sounds like something you should hear yourself say." He didn't answer that. The development that changed the texture of everything happened on the 6th morning. Ethan arrived at Vale Technologies at 8:40 and found Ariana's office occupied by two people he hadn't seen before, a man and a woman, both in dark suits, with the specific federal employee quality of people who had surrendered personal style to institutional function. Ariana was at her desk, looking like she had been awake for several hours and had made peace with it. "These are Agents Morrow and Tate from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division," she said. "They've been briefed on our findings from the past week. They have something." Agent Morrow, the woman, early 40s, efficient manner, opened a laptop on the conference table. "We've been tracking Marcus Holt since his release. As of 4 days ago, we have confirmed movement. He entered the country under a secondary passport, an Irish document we didn't have flagged. He's currently believed to be in the metropolitan area." The room absorbed that. "He's here," Ethan said. "We believe so. We also believe," she clicked to the next document, "based on intercepts from the past 48 hours, that the timeline for whatever Holt's network is planning has accelerated. The Gala operation was either abandoned or treated as a partial success. Either way, they're moving faster now." "Accelerated to when?" Ariana asked. "We don't know. That's the problem." Morrow looked at her directly. "Ms. Vale, we're recommending you relocate to a secure facility for the next 72 hours while we—" "No. Ms. Vale, this company has 400 employees who come to work here every day. Moving me doesn't protect the building, the servers, or the people. It just moves the target." She said it flatly, without heat. "I'm not relocating." Morrow looked at Agent Tate, who said nothing, which seemed to confirm that they had expected this response. Morrow looked at Ethan. "And you are personal security," he said. "And I agree with her." Another look between the agents. Morrow closed the laptop. "We'll have additional surveillance resources in place by end of day. We need you to brief us fully on the financial analysis your team has developed. It may connect to tracking we've already done." "My analyst can meet with you tomorrow morning," Ariana said. "She's thorough and she'll have everything documented." "She?" Morrow said. "She," Ariana confirmed. 9 a.m. After the agents left, the office was quiet for a moment. Ariana stood at the window again, the same position Ethan had found her in 6 days ago. Below, the city moved in its ordinary way, traffic and pedestrians and the indifferent machinery of a place too large to notice that something was building inside it. "He's here," she said again, quietly. More to herself. "Yeah." She turned. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, not diplomatically." "Okay. Are you scared?" He thought about the honest answer. "Not scared exactly. Alert. There's a difference. Fear is about what might happen. Alert is about what's actually in front of you." He paused. "Are you?" She looked at him for a moment. "I built this company from nothing. I took it from an idea in a bad apartment with no heat to what you see out there. I've had people underestimate me, steal from me, try to buy me out when they couldn't beat me." A pause. "I've been scared before. I know what it feels like. What I feel right now isn't quite that either." She looked back out the window. "I'm angry. Mostly I'm just angry." He understood that. Anger was cleaner than fear, more useful. "Good," he said. "Stay angry." She almost smiled again. it was getting slightly less small. Outside the windows, 43 floors below, the city went about its ordinary day, and somewhere inside it, Marcus Holt was moving through it with a plan that had been a year in the making and a network that had $60 million behind it, and a target he'd spent 4 years deciding he was owed. He had no idea that a 16-year-old girl had already traced his money through 3 jurisdictions and mapped his corporate structure to a Delaware address. He had no idea that a former Marine who'd been hired to stand by a door for $320 was now inside the building, inside the operation, seeing the full picture. He should have checked what was in the room before he decided the room was empty. The call came at 6:41 in the morning, 9 days after the gala. 2 days after the FBI agents had sat in Ariana's office and said the word accelerated in a way that hadn't left Ethan's head since. He was in the kitchen making coffee when his phone rang. Ariana's number, which she'd never used to call him before. She texted, she emailed. She used the building's internal communication system when he was already on site. The fact that she was calling told him something before she said a word. "Maya's meeting with the FBI this morning," he said, picking up. "She's got everything documented. We're leaving in 40 minutes. Don't come to the office yet." Her voice was controlled, but it had a different texture than usual, tighter. "My network security team picked up something overnight. Someone made a second intrusion attempt around 3 a.m. This one got further than the first." He set down the coffee. "How far?" They were stopped before reaching Sentinel's file partition, but they established a foothold in our lower system architecture. Our team found and removed it this morning, but... A pause. "The foothold wasn't for data extraction, Ethan. It was for mapping, floor plans, access points, elevator systems, security camera routing. They were learning the inside of the building." He stood in the quiet kitchen and thought about what that meant. What you needed a building map for. What kind of operation required knowing where the cameras were and how the elevators worked. "They're coming in," he said. "That's what I think." "Have you told the FBI?" "Morrow's been notified. She's moving assets, but she said it takes time to mobilize the kind of response this would need, and she doesn't have a timeline. She doesn't know when, she just knows the pattern matches a pre-incursion reconnaissance profile." Another pause. "I have 400 people coming to work today, Ethan. I can't tell them to stay home without a specific threat confirmed. And if I start sending people away, it signals Holt's network that we've detected something. So you're keeping the building operational." Devlin agrees. "Normal operations, elevated internal security, FBI assets positioning outside. We draw them in on our terms rather than, that's not necessarily better," he said. "Drawing them in means they're inside." "I know." Her voice was flat with the particular flatness of someone who had weighed something and didn't like any of the options but had picked one anyway. "I need you here. Now." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and looked at the hallway. Maya's bedroom door was closed. He could hear the faint sound of her already moving around in there. She woke up early on important days, always had, something about her brain wanting time to prepare. Today was the FBI briefing day. She'd been organizing her documentation for 2 nights. He knocked on her door. "Maya, change of plans," Dit said. She didn't argue about staying home. That was the thing that stayed with Ethan as he drove through the early morning city. She'd listened, asked 2 precise questions, and then said okay with the steadiness of someone who understood the situation rather than a teenager being managed. He didn't know whether that made him proud or whether it broke something in him slightly that she'd had to develop that kind of steadiness. Both, probably. The same answer as always. He'd set up the remote access protocol with Vale's IT security the week before. Maya could connect to the research partition from home, securely, and the connection was encrypted end-to-end. He'd had Devlin install a secondary lock on the apartment door and brief the building super on not letting anyone up without calling Maya's phone first. It wasn't a fortress. It was the best available option, which was a phrase that had come to define the past 9 days. The Vale Technologies lobby was different when he walked in at 7:18. Functionally, the same. The same reception desk, the same badge scanners, the same building directory on the east wall. But Devlin had repositioned 4 of the security staff and added 2 more at the elevator banks, and there was a particular quality of alertness in the building that a civilian probably wouldn't have noticed, and that Ethan noticed immediately. Devlin met him at the elevator. He was a compact man in his late 40s who communicated primarily through brief statements and long silences, which Ethan had come to understand as a sign of respect. Devlin explained things fully to people he considered worth explaining things to. 6 confirmed assets from FBI are in position on the street and in the parking structure, Devlin said. 2 more in plainclothes in the lobby. I've restricted elevator access above floor 30 to badge only, added a secondary check at the stairwell exits on floors 35 through 42. He paused. We still have a problem. The loading dock, Ethan said. A brief silence that confirmed it. City inspection this morning, scheduled 3 weeks ago, routine HVAC compliance review. 3 city contractors have legitimate access from 8 a.m. I've run the names. They check out. But the building schematic they accessed in the overnight intrusion included the loading dock service route, which is exactly where you'd stage if you wanted to move people and equipment inside without going through the main entrance. Yes. Can you reschedule the inspection? Made the call at 6 a.m. City Inspector's supervisor said rescheduling 48 hours in advance voids the compliance cycle and triggers an automatic fine and a secondary audit. The building's ownership, Devlin paused in a way that indicated he found this part distasteful, said to let the inspection proceed. Ethan looked at him. The building's ownership doesn't know we're potentially having armed contractors in the building today. The building's ownership knows there's an elevated security situation. They made a legal calculation. Another pause. I disagreed. Okay, Ethan said. The inspection proceeds. You put 2 of your best people on the dock from 7:45. Anyone who comes through that entrance gets eyes on them every second they're in the building. The moment something doesn't match. Anything, you call it. Devlin nodded. It was the decision he'd already made. He just wanted confirmation. Ms. Vale is upstairs. Ariana was at the whiteboard when he walked in, which was where she seemed to process difficult information. Standing, writing, making the invisible visible. She'd added to it overnight. The board was dense now, a map of connections and timelines and financial flows that had grown from a single name in the upper left corner to something that covered most of the surface. Agent Morrow was there too, jacket on, no coffee, looking like a person in the middle of something. Assets are in position, Morrow said when Ethan walked in. We have a mobile command unit 2 blocks east. If this moves today... She stopped, chose the word more carefully. When this moves, we'll have response capability within 4 minutes of a call. 4 minutes is a long time, Ethan said. I know that. People can die in 4 minutes. I know that too. She met his eyes without flinching. We're working with what we have. The legal threshold for a preemptive move isn't there yet. I need them inside the building and actively engaged before I can mobilize a full entry team without risk of the whole case getting thrown out on Fourth Amendment grounds. You need them to start before you can stop them. I need evidence of an active crime in progress. Yes. He looked at Ariana. She was looking at the board. The Sentinel partition, Ethan said. Where is it physically? Which floor? Which server room? 39th floor, Ariana said. Secondary server room on the north side. It's behind a separate access system, different credentials from the rest of the building, air-gapped from the main network, physical key plus biometric plus a code that changes every 12 hours. Who has access? 4 people. Me, our CTO Daniel Park, and 2 senior engineers. She turned from the board. Daniel is the one I trust least right now. Morrow looked up. Explain. He's been distracted for 3 weeks. I noticed it before the gala. He's been leaving early. His keycard access shows late-night entries to the server floor that he hasn't logged in the project system. I haven't confronted him because I don't have proof of anything. He could have legitimate reasons. But the timing, you think he's been turned, Ethan said. I think it's possible someone got to him, financially or otherwise. Morrow stood up. I need that access log from the past 30 days, full building keycard data, today. I'll have it to you within the hour. Ariana looked at Ethan. I want you on my floor. I want you within line of sight of the Sentinel room entrance. Done. The morning passed in the suspended, tight-wired way of waiting for something that you couldn't hurry and couldn't stop. Ethan positioned himself at the end of the corridor on 39, where he could see both the Sentinel server room door and the stairwell access. He watched people come and go. Engineers, assistants, a facilities person who replaced a fluorescent tube in the hallway ceiling and left. He cataloged everything. He stayed off his phone except for one text from Maya at 9:47. FBI briefing going well. Morrow's analyst is sharp. They're matching 2 of my gray wall findings to their own intercepts. He replied, "Good. Stay on the connection. Text me every hour." She replied, "You mean text you every 30 minutes?" He didn't correct her. At 11:19, the loading dock called it. Devlin's voice in his earpiece, controlled and flat. "Cross, we've got a problem on the dock. City contractors showed credentials that matched the scheduled inspection, but the HVAC equipment they brought in, one of the cases is the wrong dimension for the declared manifest. Contractor 3 is carrying something under his jacket, and it's not a tool belt." "How many?" 3 confirmed on the dock. Building camera shows a white cargo van on the service road that's been there since 7:50 and hasn't unloaded. Unknown occupants. "Pull the dock team back. Don't engage." "What floor are they on?" "Dock level. Service elevator is active. Someone called it from the dock 30 seconds ago." The service elevator went to every floor. Ethan pressed his earpiece. "Morrow, dock level, active incursion. Your call on timing." A brief pause. "We need 60 seconds to move teams into position. Keep the service elevator busy. Floor changes, anything. Don't let them establish position inside before we have entry teams at the exits." "Devlin," Ethan said. "Already on it," Devlin said. "Service elevator's been recalled to 42. Maintenance override." 60 seconds, maybe 90. Ethan looked at the Sentinel room door, looked at the stairwell. Did the math on what 3 contractors on the dock level plus unknown occupants in a cargo van added up to? The dock team was the visible element, the distraction, probably. The van was the real operation. He pushed off the wall and moved to Ariana's office. He opened the door without knocking. She was at her desk, on a call, and looked up with an expression that changed immediately when she saw his face. She ended the call. "Now?" "Loading dock. 3 in the building, more in a van outside. FBI is 60 seconds out." He crossed the room. "I need you away from the windows and away from this office." "The Sentinel room. You have your credentials?" "Always. That room is air-gapped, reinforced door, separate access system. It's the most defensible space on this floor." He was already moving. She was already following. "Is there anyone else on this floor right now?" 2 engineers, end of the hallway. The glass-walled office." "Get them." She went. He went to the stairwell door and held it. Listened. Nothing yet, but the service elevator ping from the floor below reached him faintly through the metal of the door. They were moving. Ariana came back with the 2 engineers. A woman named Rhea and a man named Sullivan, both of them reading the situation in Ethan's face and going pale and quiet in the way that intelligent people go quiet when they understand something has gone from abstract to concrete. "Sentinel room," Ethan said. "Now, all of you." They moved down the corridor. Ariana's keycard, her thumb on the biometric panel, the 6-digit code. The door was heavy, reinforced steel behind a facade panel, the kind of door that was installed for exactly this kind of situation. It opened. They went in. Ethan held the door. "Lock it from inside. Do not open it for anyone who isn't FBI with a badge you can physically read. Anyone who says they're me, doesn't matter. You don't open it." Ariana looked at him from inside the room. The engineers were behind her, already pulling out phones. The room was cold and humming with server racks and blue indicator lights. It was strange. The most valuable thing in the building was also the most secure, and she was locked inside it, which was the right place to be, and he was standing outside it, which was also the right place to be. "Ethan," she said, "I'll be fine." "That's not what I was going to say." She met his eyes. "Be smart. Not just brave. Smart." He almost said something else. He pulled the door shut instead and heard the locks engage on the other side. He turned to the corridor and assessed. 1 way in from the stairwell, 1 way in from the main elevator bank, 1 interior corridor connection to the east side of the floor. Devlin's voice in his ear. "Cross, We've got 3 more through the loading dock. They split from the first team. 2 are heading for the main stairwell. 1 has gone east into the building interior. The van. Doors open. I count 4 exiting. 7 total. Maybe 8. Where's Devlin? He said into the earpiece. Lobby, holding the main desk team. 2 of FBI's plainclothes are with me. We've got the ground floor. I need someone on 39. Sending 1 up now. Take 2 minutes. He had 2 minutes. He positioned himself at the T-junction of the corridor, where he had sight lines to both the stairwell door and the elevator bank. He found a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall, 12 pounds, solid, and took it down and held it in his left hand because a fire extinguisher was a better weapon than nothing, and nothing was what he currently had. The stairwell door came open hard. The first man through was moving fast, which was good for Ethan because fast movement trades accuracy for speed, and Ethan had positioned himself at the angle where the door swing created a blind spot. He was behind the man before the man had fully registered the corridor layout. The extinguisher connected with the back of the man's knee, the leverage point, the one that took a person down without negotiation, and the man hit the floor. Ethan had the man's weapon arm controlled before he could bring it around. The second man through the door had the time to see what was happening and adjust. He came in lower, more cautious, weapon up. Ethan used the first man's body as a block, pushed him forward into the second man's sight line, crossed the distance, and the collision of all 3 of them against the corridor wall knocked framed prints off their mounts and sent them shattering on the floor. This was the part where Ethan's body was going to remind him later that he was 32 and had been sleeping 6 hours a night and had a bruise on his cheekbone that hadn't fully healed. His shoulder hit the wall wrong, and the arm went briefly hot with something that wasn't quite pain yet. He filed it away. The second man was better than the first. He got loose, got distance, leveled his weapon. Ethan went left. There was an office door to his left. He took it, the bullet went into the door frame above his shoulder, and the wood exploded in a spray of splinters. He was inside the office, desk between him and the door. Not a good position, but a buying time position. His earpiece crackled. Morrow's voice. Entry teams are in the building, main entrance and dock level. 30 seconds. He heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Was the second man approaching the door, not rushing, controlled, professional. Ethan picked up the desk chair. It was one of those expensive ergonomic things that weighed about 15 pounds. He waited for the door to come open, and when it did, he threw the chair at head height and stepped forward into the throw, using the distraction to close the distance while the man's hands went up reflexively. It still hurt when the man's elbow caught him on the same cheekbone. It hurt worse than it should have because of the existing bruise, and Ethan made an involuntary sound that he was not proud of and drove his knee up and followed it with everything his shoulder had left. And the man went down and stayed down. He stood in the doorway of the office, breathing hard. His cheekbone felt like it was on fire. His shoulder was sending messages he was going to have to attend to eventually. Down the corridor, the third man, the one Devlin had said went east, emerged from the connecting hallway. He stopped when he saw Ethan and the 2 men on the ground and whatever was visible in Ethan's face at that moment. They looked at each other. From below, muffled by floors and concrete, Ethan could hear the sounds of entry. Heavy footfalls, shouted commands, the procedural noise of a law enforcement operation moving fast through a building. The FBI was inside. The third man looked at the stairwell, looked at Ethan, looked at the stairwell. "Don't," Ethan said. He was winded, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. "There's nowhere to go. They're on every floor by now." The man stared at him for a long moment. Something in the calculation shifted. Ethan could see it, the moment when the operational math became obvious and staying operational became irrational. The man set his weapon down on the floor slowly, by the barrel, and put his hands up. Ethan exhaled. His shoulder throbbed. "Smart," he said. Bisset. He found out about Daniel Park 20 minutes later. Park had been detained in the parking structure. He tried to leave the building at 11:22, which was 8 minutes before the dock team came through, which told Ethan and Morrow everything they needed to know about what Park had known and when he'd known it. In the arrest search, they found a burner phone with 6 messages from an encrypted number, all within the past 2 weeks, the most recent of which was a single word sent at 11:15 that morning. "Go." the signal that the operation was live. Park had known the timeline. Park had been the inside piece, someone who could confirm access protocols, confirm Ariana's location in the building, confirm which engineers would be on the Sentinel floor on a Tuesday morning. Someone had gotten to him. Morrow said later that it looked like financial leverage. Park had a sister with significant medical debt that had been quietly purchased by an LLC connected to the Northgate network. The leverage was the debt. The threat was obvious. Ethan thought about that for a long time afterward, how you could turn someone not through conviction, but through the exploitation of something they couldn't fix any other way. Park hadn't wanted to do it. That was almost harder to think about than if he had. The cargo van team had been stopped in the parking structure by 2 FBI entry agents before they reached the building. Of the 7 confirmed operatives, 4 were in custody. One was being treated for injuries sustained in the lobby when Devlin and the FBI plainclothes officers intercepted them, and 2 had managed to exit the building during the initial chaos before the perimeter was fully established. 2 were loose. Morrow told Ethan this in the corridor on 39 while an FBI forensics team worked the stairwell, and the way she told him, straight without softening it, confirmed that she'd come to understand in the past 10 days that he needed the unfiltered version. The van team's objective was the server room, she said. We recovered equipment from the van consistent with forced entry tools and portable drive copying hardware. They weren't here to destroy Sentinel. They were here to take it. And Holt? Ethan asked. Morrow was quiet for a moment. Not in the building, not in the van, not on the dock. She looked at him. We have no confirmed location. The operation ran without him physically present. He absorbed that. He's not here because he doesn't need to be here. He's somewhere safe while his people do the work. That's the working assumption. Which means the 2 who got out may have a way to reach him, or may not. Operational security like this typically means the field team doesn't know where the principal is. She paused. We're working it. He looked at the Sentinel room door, still locked. I need to tell her. I'll tell her, Morrow said. That's my job. Tell her about Park gently. He met Morrow's eyes. She trusted him. A brief pause. I know. Ethan walked to the end of the corridor and looked out the window at the city below. 43 floors down, he could see the FBI vehicles now, the controlled perimeter, the organized presence of an operation that had come very close to being too late. He could see the white cargo van, doors standing open, in the parking structure entrance. His phone buzzed. Maya. I've been watching the news feeds. Are you okay? Is Ariana okay? He typed, Everyone's okay. Building's secure. I found something. About Holt. While the building thing was happening, I kept working. He straightened. What did you find? The 2 Northgate investor accounts. The numbered ones I couldn't trace. I found a shared legal filing. It took me 6 hours across 3 different databases. The filing is for a private residence, a property held in trust, used as a registered address for correspondence for one of the numbered accounts. Where? A pause. Then, 14 miles from the Vale Technologies building. He's not running, he's watching. Ethan stared at his phone. The operation today had failed. The contractors were in custody. The building was secure. Sentinel was untouched. From any reasonable outside view, this was over or close to it. But Holt was 14 miles away and he was watching, which meant he already knew the operation had failed, which meant he was deciding what came next. And the 2 men who had gotten out of the building knew that Ethan had been the one standing between them and the Sentinel room. They'd seen his face. They knew he was in the picture now, and they knew about Maya from whatever Park had told them, and they knew where the hole in the fence was. He looked at the Sentinel room door. He looked at the window. He looked at his phone. 14 miles. He called Maya back. Don't leave the apartment, he said. I mean it, not for anything. I'm sending someone to be at the door within the hour. What's happening? Holt knows the operation failed. He's close. He's not done. He kept his voice level. You found something important today, Maya. Really important. But right now, I need you to lock the door and stay inside and let me handle what comes next. A silence that was longer than he wanted it to be. Okay, she said. Her voice was steady. It always was. He stood in the corridor of the 39th floor of Vale Technologies and understood that the building was secure and Ariana was safe, and 4 of Holt's people were in federal custody. He understood that by every visible measure, today had been a win. He understood that Marcus Holt was 14 miles away, in a house that a 16-year-old girl had just found, looking at the same news feeds, doing his own math, and deciding that the people who had stopped him today were now the primary obstacle. That was the thing about a man who had lost everything once and rebuilt a criminal network in the silence of 4 years. He wasn't impulsive, he wasn't panicked, he was patient and organized and completely without the limits that a normal sense of consequence imposed. Today was not the end of anything. Ethan put his phone in his pocket and went to tell Ariana. Morrow confirmed the address at 4:17 p.m. The property was registered to a trust called Halcyon Residential Holdings, one of 14 trusts connected to the Northgate asset web that Maya had been mapping for the past week. The house itself was a 6-bedroom colonial on a wooded lot in a suburb called Westerfield, 14 miles northeast of the financial district, the kind of neighborhood where people paid for privacy with acreage and didn't ask questions about their neighbors. The trust had purchased it 11 months ago. Cash transaction. No mortgage. 11 months. 1 month before Tidewall Holdings was registered. 2 months before the first wire transfer to the contractor network. Holt had been building toward this from the moment he walked out of the federal courthouse a free man. Every shell company, every wire transfer, every offshore account, it was all architecture built around a single objective, not just revenge, acquisition. He wanted Sentinel, and he wanted Ariana Vale's professional destruction as a secondary return on the same investment. Morrow briefed Ethan and Ariana at 5 p.m. in a conference room on the 38th floor, while FBI forensics continued working the floors above. She laid it out directly, the way she'd learned to do it over the past 10 days. No cushioning, just sequence. "We have the address confirmed," she said. "We have surveillance assets on the property as of 40 minutes ago. There's activity inside. At least 2 vehicles on the property, heat signatures consistent with 3 to 5 individuals. We are building the warrant application now." She paused. "We expect to execute within 12 to 18 hours. 12 to 18 hours, Ethan said. "Warrant applications require—" "I understand what they require." He kept his voice even. "You said 2 of the building team got out. Those 2 know that Maya found the property. They know she's been doing the research that's been building this case. If they report back to Holt tonight, we have eyes on the property. If anyone exits, surveillance doesn't stop a phone call." He looked at Morrow directly. "Holt knows his operation failed today. He knows the FBI is building a case. He has 12 to 18 hours before you come through his door. If he decides to use that window, we have an agent outside your building," Morrow said. 2. "I moved them there this afternoon." He looked at her. She looked back. 2 agents outside the building isn't the same as the building being secure," he said. "I know." Ariana had been quiet through this, sitting at the end of the table with her hands flat on the surface in front of her, listening. Now she spoke. "Move Maya here. Tonight. She can stay in the building. We have secure guest accommodations on 37. Full building security, FBI assets on the perimeter, access control on every floor." She looked at Ethan. "She's safer here than in an apartment with a secondary lock and 2 agents on the street." He thought about it. He thought about Maya alone in the apartment, the locked door, the orange router light blinking philosophically on the shelf. He thought about a man 14 miles away with 12 hours to decide that the 16-year-old girl who had unraveled his financial network was a loose end worth addressing. "I'll call her," he said. "Well," Maya arrived at Vale Technologies at 7:40 p.m. with a backpack, her laptop, the spiral-bound folder, and the expression of someone who was trying to look like this was a reasonable Tuesday evening and not quite pulling it off. She took in the FBI presence in the lobby, the repositioned security staff, the forensics tape still visible at the top of the stairwell, and said nothing about any of it until they were in the elevator. "What floor?" she said. 37, guest suite. "And you're on 39? "I'm wherever I need to be." She looked at him sideways. His shoulder was in a compression wrap under his jacket. He'd finally let the building's contracted medic look at it around 3 p.m., and the medic had used the word strained rather than damaged, which Ethan had chosen to find encouraging. His cheekbone had graduated from purple to an unpleasant greenish yellow, that was technically an improvement. "You look worse than yesterday," Maya said. "Yesterday I hadn't been in a hallway fight." "Fair point." She shifted the backpack on her shoulder. "I finished the Northgate mapping on the way over. Full documentation, cross-referenced, everything traceable from the original 2018 Renshaw data through the Greywall structure to Tidewall Holdings and the contractor payments." She paused. "I also found the investor identities." He turned to look at her. "The numbered accounts. All three. The shared legal filing gave me one. The other two took longer. I had to go through property tax records in 2 states and cross-reference with Renshaw Capital's original partnership disclosure documents from 2016. The elevator opened on 37. She followed him out. "They're not nobodies, Dad. One of them is a former state senator. One ran a regional hospital network. The third is a fund manager who manages retirement assets for 11 mid-sized companies." He stopped walking. "They're legitimate." They were legitimate. They put money into Renshaw Capital as limited partners and lost significantly when the fraud collapsed and the stock tanked. They're not career criminals. They're people who lost a lot of money and got approached by someone who told them he knew how to get it back. She looked at him steadily. "That's what made this so hard to see. It's not a crime network full of obvious bad actors. It's a mix of career criminal infrastructure and people who made one very bad decision when they were angry and desperate enough." He thought about Daniel Park and his sister's medical debt. He thought about the architecture of leverage, how you didn't always need to find criminals to build a criminal operation. Sometimes you just needed to find people who were in the right kind of pain. "Give everything tomorrow tonight," he said. "The full documentation. She needs the investor identities before the warrant executes." "Already sent. I emailed the package to her analyst at 6:30. She said it simply. The way she said things she'd already taken care of. "The analyst called me. She said it was the most complete financial mapping she'd seen from a non-professional source." A small pause. "I told her I'd take that as a compliment." He looked at his daughter for a moment. The backpack, the folder, the matter-of-fact way she stood in the corridor of a building that had been the site of an armed incursion 8 hours ago. "Are you okay?" he said. "Yes. Are you?" "More or less." She almost smiled. It was the same phrase he'd heard Ariana use in the ballroom, 10 days and a completely different life ago. He wasn't sure when his daughter had picked it up or whether she'd borrowed it deliberately. "Go get settled," he said. "I'll come find you later." He found Ariana in the Sentinel room at 9 p.m. She was sitting on the floor with her back against one of the server racks, shoes off, laptop open on her knees, a cup of coffee cooling on the floor beside her. The room hummed with its constant mechanical breathing, the servers, the climate control, the quiet industry of systems maintaining themselves. Blue indicator lights ran in rows across the racks above her. She looked up when he came in and didn't look embarrassed about the floor situation, which he appreciated. "I needed to think somewhere quiet," she said. "This room has no cell signal, no windows, and nobody walks in without my biometric. It's the most private space in the building. And the fact that it's an impenetrable server room is incidental. Completely incidental." She nodded at the wall to her left. He sat down against it, the floor cold through his jacket. They sat in the server room's blue-tinged quiet and didn't say anything for a moment. "Morrow called me at 8, Ariana said. "She got the investor identities from Maya's package. She says it changes the scope of the prosecution. These aren't just accessory charges anymore. It's a conspiracy that goes back 6 years and involves people with public profiles." She paused. "It's going to be a significant case." "Yeah." "Your daughter did that." "She did." Ariana looked at the laptop screen without really reading it. "I keep thinking about what I missed, with Daniel. I noticed something was wrong for 3 weeks, and I didn't act on it because I didn't have proof, and I didn't want to be wrong about someone I'd worked with for 4 years. She paused. "If I'd acted on it earlier, you couldn't have known the full picture," Ethan said. "I could have removed his access, changed the credentials. And if you were wrong about him, you'd have ended a 4-year working relationship based on a feeling." He looked at her. "You made a reasonable call with the information you had. The outcome was bad, but the reasoning wasn't." She was quiet. "That's more generous than the situation deserves." "It's accurate." There's a difference. She looked at him. In the blue server light, with her shoes off and the evening's exhaustion visible in the set of her shoulders, she looked more human than she usually let herself appear. Or maybe more human than she usually could appear in a building full of people who needed her to be a certain kind of certain about everything. I don't normally sit on server room floors, she said. I wouldn't have guessed. I'm not great at— She stopped, chose the word with some care. At stopping. I'm not good at the moment between what happened and what happens next. I always want to skip straight to the next problem. That's how you built an $8 billion company. It's also how I end up on the floor at 9 p.m. talking to a former Marine about my feelings about evidence management. She said it with a dry note that wasn't quite humor and wasn't quite self-deprecation, something in between. How do you do it? You've been in situations like today before. Worse situations. How do you move through them without— She made a gesture that he interpreted as falling apart, though she hadn't said it. He thought about it honestly. I stopped moving through them cleanly a long time ago. I just got better at hiding the seams. He paused. And I have Maya. Which sounds simple, but it isn't. Having someone who needs you to be functional is the most effective structural support I've ever found. She needs you to be functional, so you are. More or less, she looked at the laptop again. I don't have that. Someone who needs me to be functional. A pause. I have 400 employees and a board of directors and a company, which is a different kind of obligation, but it's not. She stopped. He didn't fill the silence because it seemed like the kind of silence that deserved to be left alone. It's not personal, she finished. It's not the same. No, he said. It's not. They sat in the quiet hum of the server room, and the blue light moved over everything evenly, and outside the building the city was doing its indifferent city things, and Ethan was aware in the way he'd been intermittently aware for the past 10 days that something had been slowly changing in the space between himself and Ariana Vale. Not rushing, not announcing itself, just quietly accumulating the way significant things sometimes do when people are too busy surviving to notice. He didn't say anything about it. Neither did she. But it was there, and they both knew it was there, and leaving it unnamed felt like the right thing to do for now. His phone buzzed. Morrow. He stood up, answered. We're moving the warrant timeline up, Morrow said. Her voice had the clipped energy of someone shifting from preparation to execution. Holt's surveillance team flagged movement on the property 40 minutes ago. One vehicle left, returned 20 minutes later with a third vehicle. We believe he may be consolidating, Chubb. Bringing people in or preparing to move. Judge has been contacted for emergency authorization. We expect to execute at 0200. 2 a.m. Yes. I wanted you informed. A pause. Cross. The two individuals who exited the building today have been reacquired. We tracked them to a hotel 8 blocks from the property. They're under surveillance. We do not believe they've made contact with Holt's location directly, but we can't confirm they haven't communicated electronically. Understood. I want you and Ms. Vale to remain in the building until I give the all clear. Do not leave for any reason until we have Holt in custody. Copy that. He hung up and looked at Ariana. 2 a.m., he said. They're executing the warrant. She nodded and started to get up. He offered his hand. She took it and stood, and they were briefly close together in the server room's cold hum, and she didn't immediately let go of his hand, and he didn't immediately step back, and then both things happened in the way that inevitable things happen when the timing finally becomes undeniable. 2 a.m., she said quietly. Yeah. Then we wait. The waiting was its own kind of hard. They moved to the 38th floor conference room at 10 p.m. Ethan, Ariana, and Maya, who had appeared at the door of the guest suite when Ethan knocked and shown him her laptop screen. She'd been awake, working, pulling secondary documentation from a Renshaw Capital filing she'd found in a securities archive that corroborated one of the investor identities and connected it directly to a series of payments that predated even the conspiracy Morrow's team had mapped. She'd sent it to Morrow's analyst at 9:55. The analyst had responded in 11 minutes. This is exactly what we needed. How is she doing this? Maya had shown Ethan the message with the expression she had when she was trying not to look pleased with herself and not entirely succeeding. They sat in the conference room and drank bad coffee, and watched the city through the tall windows and talked about things that weren't the operation. Ariana asked Maya about school, real questions, not the polite adult version of asking teenagers about school that was really just waiting for them to say fine. Maya answered honestly, which was unusual. She typically gave adults the abbreviated version. She told Ariana about the AP Computer Science course that moved too slowly for her and the independent research project she'd been trying to get her school to let her submit as dual enrollment. She talked about the systems analysis class she was taking online through a university program that had accepted her application with a note that said they didn't normally admit students under 18, but were making an exception. Ariana listened with the focused attention she gave everything and asked specific questions, and when Maya explained the methodology she'd used to build the Northgate financial map, the database cross-referencing, the shared legal filing discovery, the property tax record approach, Ariana had leaned forward and said, "Walk me through the property tax piece, step by step." Maya had walked her through it, step by step. Ariana had asked 2 clarifying questions, taken notes, and said, "That's an original methodology. I haven't seen that cross-reference approach used in a forensic accounting context before. You developed it yourself." Maya had said, "There wasn't an existing method that worked for what I needed, so I built one." Ariana had looked at Ethan then, briefly. With something in her expression that wasn't surprise, she'd stopped being surprised by Maya around day 3. But with something larger, a kind of recognition. The way you look at something and understand that it is going to matter, that it is not small, that whatever it becomes will take up real space in the world. Ethan had looked back at her and felt something in his chest that was too complicated to identify and too present to ignore. At 1:40 a.m., Morrow called. "Teams are in position, executing at 0200 as planned. Stay put." They stayed put. At 2:17 a.m., Morrow called again. "We're in. 3 individuals detained at the property. 1 is Holt, confirmed ID. 1 is a known associate from the contractor network. 3rd is a logistics operator we've been looking for in connection with the Tidewall wire transfers." A pause, and in the pause, Ethan could hear the controlled chaos of a law enforcement operation winding down, radio traffic, voices, the sound of a property being systematically cleared. Holt did not resist. He was in the study when we came through. He was on a laptop. Another pause. He'd been attempting to route the Sentinel documentation, the data from the overnight intrusion attempt, the foothold that our team thought they'd fully removed. Apparently there was a secondary cache we missed. He had partial files. "Had," Ethan said. "We stopped it before the transfer completed. The data is recoverable and contained." Her voice was flatter than usual, the aftermath flatness of a long operation concluding. "It's over, Cross. We have him." He sat with that for a moment. The conference room was quiet. Ariana and Maya were both watching him. "Holt said anything?" he asked. "Not yet. He will." These people always do eventually, when they understand the full scope of what we have. With the investor identities, the financial mapping, the contractor network, the attempted transfer tonight, she exhaled. "He's looking at federal charges across 3 jurisdictions. He's going to talk." "And the investors? They'll be contacted tomorrow. Their cooperation will be factored into their exposure. That's above my pay grade, but it's the standard approach." A pause. "Tell your daughter she did exceptional work. I mean that." "I'll tell her." He hung up and looked across the conference room. Ariana and Maya were both watching him with the particular attention of people who have been waiting for a specific piece of information and understand it has just arrived. "He's in custody," Ethan said. Maya exhaled, a long, slow release of something she'd been holding since the night on the couch, when she'd found the name Marcus Holt in 4 minutes and understood that her father was now inside something significant. She didn't say anything. She closed her laptop and set it on the table carefully, the way she handled things she considered important, and looked at the window. Ariana looked at Ethan. He looked back. Outside, the city was doing the quiet, indifferent thing it did between 2 and 3 in the morning. Minimal traffic, the distant sound of a delivery truck on a cross street, the ordinary hum of a place that was too large to stop entirely. The chandelier in the Harrington Grand Ballroom was dark. Somewhere in Westerfield, federal agents were walking through a colonial house on a wooded lot, securing rooms, documenting everything, beginning the long procedural work of building the case that would hold. Marcus Holt had spent 4 years constructing an architecture of revenge and acquisition, patient and organized and completely without the limits that a normal sense of consequence imposed. He had $60 million and a layered corporate structure and a network of people with legitimate grievances who had made one very bad decision when they were angry enough. It had not been enough. It had not been enough because a 16-year-old girl had spent 9 days reading securities filings and property tax records and had built a financial map that even a federal analyst had called exceptional. Because a former Marine who'd been hired to watch a door for $320 had noticed 4 still men in a room of 400 guests and had made the simple, unglamorous decision to act on what he saw. Because a woman who had built a company from nothing had looked at a security guard's face in an alcove at a charity gala and understood in the space of 3 seconds that she could trust him and had. Those 3 things together, not separately. Ethan thought about that for a while, sitting in the quiet conference room with the bad coffee and the city outside, and understood that the past 10 days had been something he didn't have a clean word for. Not a job, not an assignment, something that had changed the shape of things in ways he was only beginning to map. His shoulder ached, his cheekbone ached. He was tired in the bone-level way that only happens when you've been running on adrenaline and insufficient sleep for more than a week. He was also, underneath all of that, something he recognized as okay. "We should sleep," Maya said. She said it to both of them. She'd taken to doing that, including Ariana in the address, the way you include someone who is no longer a stranger. She hadn't made a production of it. She'd just started doing it incrementally, the way 16-year-olds sometimes decide things about adults before the adults have gotten there themselves. "Yeah," Ethan said. Ariana nodded. She was looking at the table, at her own hands, at the notes she'd made during Maya's methodology explanation. She looked like a person who had been running very fast for a very long time and had just now noticed the ground under her feet. "Thank you," she said quietly. Not to one of them, to both of them. "I need you to know that." Maya picked up her laptop. "You can tell us again in the morning," she said, "after everyone slept." She headed for the door, paused, looked back at the 2 of them. Assessed the room with that spiral thinking mind of hers in the way Ethan had watched her assess rooms her entire life. Said nothing, because she'd decided that the moment didn't need a comment, and went to bed. Ethan and Ariana sat in the quiet for another minute, in the particular silence of 2 people who have come through something together and are standing on the far side of it and finding the far side both quieter and stranger than the near side was. "Go sleep," Ariana said finally, and the way she said it had the gentleness she usually kept out of her voice. Not the CEO's directness, not the operational focus, something older and less practiced. "You too," he said. She nodded. She looked like she meant it. He turned off the conference room light on his way out. Behind him, through the tall windows, the city moved through its quiet hours, and 43 floors below, the street was ordinary, and the FBI vehicles were gone, and the white cargo van was gone, and the Harrington Grand Ballroom was dark, and the chandelier was cold. Everything was still. For the first time in 10 days, the danger was actually over, and the stillness was real. And somewhere in Westerfield, a man who had built 4 years of patient architecture was sitting in federal custody, understanding that the building had come down after all. And tomorrow was going to be different from every day that had come before it. Not easier, necessarily. Not without its own complications and costs and the slow work of putting things back together. But different. That was enough. The first thing Ethan fixed in the weeks after was the truck. It cost him $280 at a shop on Delmar Street, whose owner, a heavy-set man named Otto, had been doing transmissions for 30 years and didn't charge for things that didn't need doing. Ethan sat in the waiting area on a plastic chair and drank bad coffee from a paper cup and listened to the radio play old country music and felt, for the first time in as long as he could remember, that he had nowhere urgent to be. It was a strange feeling, not comfortable exactly, more like a pair of shoes that fit differently than the ones you'd worn for a decade. You weren't sure yet whether they were better or just different. The truck came out of the bay smooth, no grinding between second and third. He drove it home through the autumn streets and shifted through every gear twice just to hear the silence where the noise used to be. Maya was at the kitchen table when he got back, laptop open, working on something she'd been asked to present at a technology ethics conference the following month, a paper she'd written about forensic financial methodology and its applications in corporate security investigations. She was 17 in 3 weeks. She'd been asked to present alongside professionals with graduate degrees and 15 years of experience, and the invitation letter had called her work a methodological contribution to the field, which was the kind of language that made her uncomfortable and proud in equal measure. She looked up when he came in. Fixed? Fixed. How much? $280. You said it was going to be $400. Otto doesn't charge for parts he doesn't use. He put his keys on the hook by the door, a habit he'd developed over the past 2 months without noticing. The hook that had appeared one day because Maya had put it there because she was tired of him leaving his keys on the counter and forgetting them. Small domestic architecture. The kind that accumulates slowly, and then one day you can't remember the apartment without it. He sat down across from her. She looked back at her screen but didn't start typing, which meant she had something to say and was deciding how to say it. She called this morning, Maya said. I know. She texted me too. The foundation announcement is next week. Yeah. Maya closed the laptop partway. How do you feel about it? He looked at his daughter. She asked him questions like that now. Direct, unadorned, the way she'd started asking things after the operation, as though what had happened in those 10 days had shifted something between them toward a more honest register. He wasn't always sure he had answers that matched the directness of the question, but he tried. I feel like it's the right thing, he said, for her, for what she wants to build. That's not what I asked. He looked at the table for a moment. I feel like it's something I want to be part of, if she'll have me. Maya nodded slowly. She'll have you, she said, with the certainty of someone who had processed the relevant data and reached a conclusion. Then she opened the laptop again because she'd said what she meant to say and didn't see the need to elaborate. That was his daughter. He'd take it. The Marcus Holt federal case moved faster than Ethan had expected, which Morrow told him was a product of the quality of the evidence rather than any particular urgency on the court's part. The financial documentation Maya had assembled, all of it, 7 jurisdictions, 6 years of transactions, 3 investor identities, the full Northgate to Tidewall architecture, had been entered into the federal record as prosecution evidence. Morrow's team had built on it, supplementing with intercepted communications and physical evidence from the Westerfield property. But the core of the financial case was Maya's work, and everyone involved in the prosecution knew it. Holt had hired 4 defense attorneys. The attorneys had spent 3 weeks reviewing the evidence and then advised their client to consider his options, which was legal language for the case against you, is too complete to fight in trial without making things worse. Holt had spent another week deciding and then accepted a plea arrangement, 22 years, federal facility, no early release eligibility for the first 14. The 3 Northgate investors had each cooperated fully in exchange for reduced sentences, a process that Morrow described to Ethan over the phone with the dry precision of someone who had watched this particular dynamic play out enough times to stop being surprised by it. Holt said something at the sentencing, Morrow told him. You'll hear about it if you follow the coverage, but I wanted to tell you directly. A pause. He said the operation failed because of one unexpected variable. He said that in his planning, he had accounted for everything except someone who noticed without being paid to notice. Ethan sat with that for a moment. He was wrong about that part, he said. I was being paid to notice. $320, Morrow said. $320. A pause that was almost humor. The FBI's Asset Recovery Division has completed its work on the Tidewall network, $41 million in recoverable assets. Those funds are being directed through forfeiture proceedings. Another pause. Your daughter's documentation was instrumental in establishing the chain of title for 17 of those assets. The prosecutor's office wants to acknowledge her formally in the case record. Ethan looked out the kitchen window. The tree on the sidewalk below had gone fully orange in the past week, the way city trees do when autumn finally decides to commit. She'll appreciate that, he said. Don't tell her until it's official. She doesn't like things that aren't certain yet. That's a very specific parenting note. 12 years of field research. Daniel Park had cooperated as well, once federal prosecutors laid out the full scope of what they had. His situation was different from the investors. The leverage that had been used against him, the medical debt structure, had been documented by Maya's research and supported his cooperation agreement. He'd received a reduced sentence and a requirement to provide testimony in 3 related proceedings. Ethan had no particular feelings about that outcome, except that it was accurate. Park had made a bad choice under terrible pressure, and accuracy required acknowledging both the choice and the pressure. That was harder to hold in your head than either pure condemnation or pure sympathy. It was also, Ethan had come to believe, the only honest way to hold it. The Vail Foundation was announced on a Thursday morning in the 3rd week of October, 6 weeks after Marcus Holt's arrest. Ariana stood at a podium in a conference space on the building's main floor. Not the grand ballroom kind of space, not the charity gala kind of event. A working room. Good lighting, 200 chairs filled with people from the technology sector, education nonprofits, university research departments, and several journalists whose presence had been carefully selected by Ariana's communications director. Ethan stood near the back wall in a position that was technically security and was also, increasingly, something harder to categorize. Maya was in the 4th row with a press credential that Ariana had arranged without consulting Ethan about it, which he'd decided not to make a thing of. Ariana spoke without notes. She did this when she meant what she was saying. She'd explained that to him once, that she used prepared remarks when she was being careful and spoke without them when she was being honest. And he'd filed it away as one of those pieces of information that told you something true about a person. Vail Technologies has built its reputation on the idea that security is not about walls, she said. It's about intelligence, the ability to see what's moving in the environment, to understand patterns before they become threats, to act with precision rather than force. She paused. The past 2 months have taught me something about that principle that I didn't understand before. Intelligence doesn't live only in systems. It lives in people. It lives in the choice to pay attention when paying attention costs you something. It lives in a 16-year-old who spent 9 days reading securities filings because the problem was there and she had the tools to approach it. Another pause. It lives in a man who stood in a room with 400 people and saw 4 things that everyone else missed, and then made the simple and expensive choice to act. Ethan looked at the floor. He was aware that several people in the room were turning to look at him, and he was aware that he had no useful response to being looked at in this context. The Vail Foundation will fund 3 programs, Ariana continued, a technology ethics research initiative housed at 3 partner universities, a secondary school program for students demonstrating exceptional aptitude in computational analysis and systems thinking, scholarship-based, need-blind, available in every state, and a security and investigation training program for non-traditional candidates, veterans, career changers, people with backgrounds in fields that aren't traditionally considered security disciplines but carry directly transferable skills. She looked up from the room, not at anyone specific, at the room as a whole. The operating principle of all 3 is simple. The most important thing in any security system is not the technology. It's the judgment of the human being who decides when and how to use it. We're going to invest in that judgment, systematically, over time. Because one person seeing clearly at the right moment is worth more than any algorithm we've built. Afterward, in the hallway outside the conference room, while the journalists were still asking questions and the attendees were still finding their coats, Maya appeared at Ethan's elbow. "The secondary school program," she said. "Yeah, that's me. That's a lot of kids like you." He looked at his daughter. "That's the point." She was quiet for a moment, in the way she was quiet when something had landed differently than she'd expected, and she was recalibrating. "She said my name," Maya said, "in front of 200 people. She did. I told her she didn't have to do that." "When did you tell her that?" "This morning. She called me." He looked at his daughter. "She called you this morning to ask if it was okay to use my name." Maya adjusted the strap of her bag. "I said yes, obviously. It would have been strange to say no." A pause. "She also asked if I'd consider being involved in the program development, the secondary school initiative, as a student advisor." Another pause, smaller. I said I'd think about it. And have you thought about it? I said yes when she called back 20 minutes later. He exhaled a breath that was almost a laugh. So you made her call you twice? I needed the 20 minutes, Maya said with complete seriousness. Then something shifted at the corner of her mouth that was not quite a smile and was entirely her. She's patient, Maya added. I like that about her. Ethan looked at the conference room doors through which he could see Ariana still talking with the journalists, composed and precise, the way she was when she was being careful with what she said because it was going to be printed somewhere. Yeah, he said. Me too. Maya followed his gaze, looked at her father, made no comment because she'd inherited his quality of knowing when a statement was complete. Well, he took her to dinner 3 weeks later. Not a formal thing until he'd thought about making it formal, and then decided that formal was wrong for what he actually wanted, which was to have a meal with her somewhere that had real tablecloths, but not so many that the tablecloths became the point. He'd asked Maya what she thought, and she'd said just pick somewhere good, Dad in the tone she used when she thought he was overcomplicating something. He picked a place on Meridian Street that had been open for 12 years and served Italian-American food in the way that Italian-American food was supposed to be served. Large, honest, slightly too much of everything, with candles and wine bottles on the tables that had burned down to different heights, depending on how long that particular table had been in use. It was the kind of restaurant where the owner knew your name after 2 visits, and where the noise level meant you had to lean in slightly to hear the person across from you, which, it turned out, was conducive to the kind of conversation Ethan had in mind. Ariana had looked at the place when they walked in. The candles, the mismatched chairs, the chalkboard specials, and said nothing about it, which he'd taken as a good sign. She'd worn a dark green dress that was the right kind of nice for the right kind of place. She'd put her phone in her bag when they sat down and left it there. He didn't take that for granted. They ordered. They talked about easy things first, the foundation launch, Maya's conference presentation, a problem with the 39th floor elevator that had been intermittent for 2 weeks and was driving Devlin to quiet fury. Normal things, the things that had become normal between them over the past 2 months of daily proximity and shared purpose, and the particular intimacy that comes from having been through something real together. At some point, he didn't notice the precise transition, which was maybe how it was supposed to work. The easy things gave way to harder ones, not heavy exactly, just more honest. I want to ask you something, Ariana said. She had a glass of red wine that she'd been nursing slowly, and she turned it by the stem in the way she turned a pen when she was thinking. And I want you to answer it the way you answer things, which is straight. Okay? When this is all settled, the foundation, the programs, the rebuilding work, what do you actually want? Not what makes sense operationally, not what fits the structure we've built. What do you want? He looked at her across the candlelight and the noise of the restaurant and understood that the question was about more than the job. I want to stay, he said, in the work, in the foundation, in... He stopped, chose the word without hiding from it. In this, whatever this is. She looked at him. You're not sure what this is? I know what it is. I'm not always sure what to call it. What does it feel like? He thought about that for a moment, the way he tried to think about honest questions honestly. It feels like the first thing in a long time that I didn't have to decide whether I deserved, he said. It just was there. And I didn't argue with it. She was quiet for a moment. Outside, through the restaurant window, the street moved in its ordinary way. Headlights, people, the small weather of a city in late October. I have a long list of things I'm not good at, she said. I should tell you that. I've noticed a few. Name one. You over-explain things to people you're not sure can keep up. You do it without meaning to. It comes out as patience, but it's actually anxiety about whether the other person has the full picture. She looked at him. That's accurate, she said, with the particular flatness of someone confronting an accurate observation about themselves. What else? You apologize by doing something useful instead of saying sorry, which is not always what the situation calls for. Also accurate. A pause. Any others? You eat your meals in the wrong order. Dessert first if you think no one's watching. She blinked. Then something opened up in her face that he hadn't quite seen before. Something younger and less composed and entirely real. How do you know that? You had a piece of chocolate cake at your desk at 9 a.m. on the Tuesday after the building incident. You thought everyone was too distracted to notice. I was in a server room at 2 in the morning the night before. I needed the cake. I'm not criticizing the cake, he said. I'm just naming the thing. She looked at him with that expression, the opened up one, the less composed one, and he thought that this was the version of her that existed when she wasn't running a company, or giving a speech, or managing a crisis. The version that ate cake at 9 in the morning and sat on server room floors with her shoes off and called his daughter on her personal phone twice in 20 minutes because she wanted to get the answer right. He thought, this is the version I want to know. I'm not easy, she said. I noticed. I work too much. I get fixated on problems. I have very high standards for how things should be done, and I get frustrated when they aren't done that way, even when the frustration isn't useful. I know. I'm telling you because you should know, not because I'm asking you to fix any of it. I'm not trying to fix anything, he said. I like the actual version of you, not a corrected one. She looked at him for a long moment. The restaurant noise moved around them. The candle between them had burned down another half-inch. I don't know how to do this slowly, she said, and there was something in her voice that was admission rather than apology. I've never been good at slow. I move fast on everything because slow felt like losing ground. We don't have to do it slowly, he said. We can do it at whatever speed it actually goes. She picked up her wine glass, set it back down without drinking from it, looked at him with the direct, assessing quality that had been the first thing he'd noticed about her, the thing that had cut through the alcove's dim light 10 weeks ago when she'd looked at his face and decided to trust him in 3 seconds. Okay, she said. It was the same word she'd used in the alcove. Simple. Loaded. He thought, yeah, okay. What? What happened in the months after didn't happen cleanly. He wanted to be honest about that, because the stories that got told about things like this, a man steps in, saves the day, gets the girl, everything resolves, those stories had a satisfaction to them that real life didn't quite replicate. Real life had a different texture, rougher in some places than you expected, better in others. His shoulder took 11 weeks to stop aching in the morning. He went to physical therapy twice a week at a place on Clement Street, and the therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Diane, who had worked with veterans before, told him the damage was old as much as new. Years of accumulated stress on a joint that had never been properly addressed after discharge. He'd known that. He'd been putting it off the same way he put off the truck, because putting it off was cheaper, because there was always something more urgent. He fixed that too. Eventually. Expensive and uncomfortable and worth it. He took the director of security role at the Vail Foundation officially in December. Not the CEO's personal security, the foundation's broader program, which meant building the security training curriculum, identifying candidates, developing the assessment methodology for the veterans and career changers the program was designed to reach. It was the kind of work that used what he actually knew rather than asking him to be adjacent to it. Devlin had given him a look when the appointment was announced that communicated something like, "It's about time," without saying it, and then gone back to managing the building's elevator problem with his characteristic focused displeasure. The work was hard, not combat hard, differently hard, the kind of hard that required patience rather than speed, the ability to see a person who was rough at the edges and understand what they could become rather than cataloging what they were. He wasn't always good at it. He misjudged people occasionally, moved too fast on some assessments, was too slow on others. He made mistakes that cost time and had to be corrected, and correcting them was not comfortable. He did it anyway. You did the work in front of you. That was the thing he'd learned in the Marines and unlearned briefly in the bad years and relearned since, not through wisdom, but through necessity, the way most real lessons come. Maya's conference paper was published in a professional journal 3 months after the presentation. The journal had a peer review process, and 4 of the 5 reviewers had recommended acceptance, and the 5th had recommended acceptance with minor revisions. And Maya had made the revisions and sent it back in 48 hours. And it had been published in February with a note from the editor calling it a significant methodological contribution and inviting the author to submit future work. The author was 17. Ariana had framed a copy without telling Maya she was doing it and put it on the wall of the foundation's offices, and Maya had seen it on a visit and stopped in front of it and stood there for a long moment, saying nothing. Ethan had watched from the doorway. Maya's face had the particular expression she had when something had arrived that she hadn't known she needed. Not surprise exactly, more like recognition of something that fit. She turned eventually and looked at Ariana and said, "That was unnecessary." Ariana had said, "I know." And that had been the end of it, which was the right end. The secondary school program launched in the spring with 47 students in its first cohort, 11 states, need-blind admission, full scholarship including a technology stipend. Maya had been involved in developing the assessment criteria, a process that had taken 4 months and produced a methodology she'd presented to the Foundation's board in a 40-minute presentation that Ethan had watched from the back of the room and found difficult to describe afterward because the accurate description involved saying that his daughter had just presented a 4-month research project to a room full of adults with PhDs and had been the most prepared person in the room, and he wasn't sure how to hold that without it taking up too much space in his chest. He held it anyway. The first cohort had 3 students who reminded him of Maya in different ways. The same quality of focused attention, the same appetite for problems, the same directness. None of them were Maya. They were themselves. That was the point. The program wasn't trying to replicate one person. It was trying to find the places where that kind of mind existed unsupported and give it something to stand on. He thought about that a lot in the months after. About what it meant to build something that served people you'd never meet, about whether that was something he'd ever expected to be part of. He hadn't. That was honest. He'd expected to keep doing what he'd been doing, the small math, the barely working, the grinding transmission, and the 11 days until rent. Not because he'd given up exactly, more because the horizon had narrowed so gradually over so many years that he'd stopped noticing it had narrowed and started mistaking the narrow version for the real size of things. 1 decision, 1 room, 4 still men that everyone else missed. He'd thought about what Morrow had relayed from Holt. 1 unexpected variable. He'd thought about it more than he expected to, not because it flattered him, but because of what it said about how things actually changed. Not through grand plans, not through preparation or positioning or the accumulation of credentials, through the one unexpected thing that nobody's architecture had accounted for because it was too human and too specific and too contingent to model. A man who noticed, a girl who read, a woman who looked at a stranger's face and decided to trust him. Those 3 things. On a Saturday in April, the 3 of them drove out to a state park 40 miles north of the city because Maya had said she needed to be somewhere that didn't have server farms in the basement, and Ariana had said she hadn't been hiking since a business trip to Colorado 3 years ago that she didn't really count because she'd spent half of it on her phone, and Ethan had said he'd been to this particular park twice with Maya when she was small and could probably find the good trail without the map app if they let him try. They let him try. He was wrong about 1 turn and right about everything after that. The trail was 2.5 miles through second-growth forest that was just beginning its spring work, new green at the tips of every branch, the particular quality of light that comes through deciduous trees in April before the canopy fills in, all vertical shafts and moving pieces. The path was muddy in sections. Maya's boots were not the right boots for mud, and she slipped twice and accepted Ethan's hand the first time and refused it the second time, which was consistent. Ariana walked well. She'd brought real hiking shoes and she used them, long strides, comfortable in the pace, not the kind of person who treated a trail like a problem to be solved quickly. Ethan had wondered about that. You could tell things about people from how they moved through space when the space didn't have any stakes in it. They stopped at the overlook 1.5 miles in. The valley below was hazy with early spring, and the river moved through it as a silver thread, and the city was visible at the far edge of the horizon, small and contained from this distance, the way cities look when you're outside them, comprehensible, manageable. Maya sat on a flat rock and pulled out her phone, and then looked at it and put it back in her pocket, which was a thing she'd been doing more lately, reaching for the phone and then deciding not to. Small victories. Ariana stood at the overlook's edge and looked at the valley with the same focused attention she gave everything, but softer than usual. The CEO quality was down. The version of her that ate cake at 9 a.m. was present. "It's good," she said. Not to anyone specifically, about the view, about the day, about something broader that she didn't feel the need to specify. "Yeah," Ethan said. Maya looked at the two of them and made no comment. They stayed at the overlook for 20 minutes. The conversation moved around easily, the kind of talking that doesn't have an agenda, that exists for its own sake. Ariana told a story about getting completely lost in a city she'd been visiting for a conference, the wrong subway line, 3 hours of walking before she'd found the hotel, and the part that had stayed with her wasn't the lostness, but the fact that she'd had the best meal of that trip at a place she'd found by accident on the wrong street. Maya said that was statistically likely because tourist recommendations optimized for consensus rather than quality, and the best things were usually off consensus by definition. Ariana had agreed with the analysis and added that this was also true of people. Maya had looked at her and said, "I'm going to use that in something." "It's yours," Ariana said. On the way back down the trail, the path narrowed and they walked single file for a stretch. Maya ahead, then Ariana, then Ethan. He watched them move down the trail together, his daughter and the woman who had walked into his life at $320 a night. And he thought about the things you couldn't plan, the things that happened because you noticed, because you moved, because you made one small choice in a room full of people who didn't. He thought about the version of this night that didn't exist, the one where he'd looked at 4 still men and decided it wasn't his problem, where he'd stood by his door and watched the evening happen and gone home at midnight with his $320 and his intact jacket and his working knuckles, and nothing had changed, and the math had stayed small, and the horizon had stayed where he'd gotten used to it being. He thought about Maya on the couch that alternate universe night, not watching the news, not texting him be safe. He couldn't fully picture it. The version of himself that would have made that choice felt like a stranger he'd once been close to. The trail opened back into the parking lot, and the 3 of them walked out into the afternoon light together, and Ariana put her hand into his naturally, without making a moment of it, the way you do when you've stopped needing to announce things because they've become simply true. He held it. They walked to the truck. Maya climbed in the back without comment. She put in her earbuds, which was her way of giving people privacy while technically being present. He'd learned this about her approximately 6 months ago and had never told her he knew, because knowing and saying were different things. He drove home through the April afternoon with the windows cracked and the transmission running smooth and Ariana's shoulder against his arm and Maya in the back listening to whatever she was listening to, probably something that would become useful in a paper she'd write in 3 months. He thought, this is what it looks like, the thing that was rebuilt. Not perfect, not resolved of all its complications. His shoulder still ached in cold weather. Ariana still ate dessert first when she thought no one was watching. Maya still kept him at a slight, loving distance when she needed to think. The foundation was 9 months old and had 47 students in one program, and a security curriculum that was still being revised, and a board that asked too many questions about metrics and not enough about people. All of it imperfect. All of it real. He thought about what people assumed when they heard a story like this, that the big moment was the thing, the chandelier and the 4 men and the ballroom floor, the Marine who stepped in. That was the story people told. That was the version that made sense as a story, with a hero and a threat and a resolution. But that wasn't where it actually lived. The chandelier moment was 1 minute and 40 seconds of his life. What came after was months. What came after was the truck transmission and the physical therapy and the spiral-bound folder and the 16-year-old who stayed up reading securities filings because the problem was there and she had the tools. What came after was sitting on a server room floor at 9 p.m. and saying more or less to someone who asked how you were and meaning it, and having them understand that you meant it, and that being enough. That was the thing worth saying, if there was one. Not that brave acts change things. They do, sometimes, in the specific way that specific acts change specific things. But the change isn't in the act. It's in everything that comes after the act, if you're willing to stay inside it. If you don't walk away when the walking away becomes available. He'd been good at walking away once. Not out of cowardice, out of the same narrow horizon math that had shaped those years. This isn't my problem. I'm not paid enough for this. I'll stay in my lane and keep my hands clean and go home at midnight. It was rational. It was also a way of staying small in a way that looked like self-preservation. The Harrington Grand Ballroom had ended that version of his life, not because of what happened in it, because of what he'd chosen inside it. One choice, one room. He'd carried a lot of things out of the Marines, skills, instincts, a way of reading spaces that he'd spent 12 civilian years thinking was baggage. It wasn't baggage, it was just a tool that had been waiting for the right problem. Most things were, if you kept them long enough, if you didn't throw away the parts of yourself that were inconvenient before you understood what they were for. The city came back into view as he drove down the long highway that connected the park to the suburbs, that connected the suburbs to the streets he knew. The skyline in the afternoon light was compact and legible, the way the valley had been from the overlook, small enough to see whole. Maya pulled out one earbud. "Dad?" "Yeah." "When we get back, can we get noodles? The place on Garfield." "It's 4:30. "I know what time it is." He looked in the rearview mirror. Maya had her head tilted against the window, and the afternoon light on her face made her look younger than 17 for a moment, the age she'd been when this started and the age she was on the verge of leaving. "Yeah," he said. "We can get noodles." She put the earbud back in. Ariana was looking at the city coming into view, her hand still easy in his. "I've never been to the place on Garfield," she said. "Then it's your lucky day," he said. She turned to look at him, the opened-up version of her face, the real one. "It really is," she said. He drove them home, through the April city, under the afternoon sky, toward noodles and whatever came next. The transmission ran clean and smooth all the way. Nothing grinding, nothing compensating, nothing held together past the point of useful. Just the road, and the people in the truck, and the particular ordinary, extraordinary quality of a day that asked nothing from him except to be present in it. He was. Some things don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly, in the middle of a room, while you're standing near a door you weren't supposed to be guarding. They arrive in the form of 4 still men that nobody else noticed, or a daughter who reads what needs reading, or a woman who looks at a stranger and decides in 3 seconds that he can be trusted. The choice is never the big one. The choice is always the small one that happens first, before you know what it costs or what it leads to. One unexpected variable. That's all it ever takes.